Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Yiddish in the Americas, a celebration of two hubs of Jewish culture and scholarship in the Western Hemisphere, YIVO in Buenos Aires and YIVO in New York. This event is organized by AJL, the Association for Jewish Libraries, in partnership with YIVO and YIVO. My name is Katalin Ratz. I'm the Jewish Studies librarian at Emory University, and I'm here in my capacity as the chair of AJL's International Initiative. 2025 marks 100 years since the foundation of YIVO in Vilna, then Vilna in Poland, today Vilnius in Lithuania, to pursue Jewish scholarship in Yiddish and cultivate Yiddish as a Jewish national language, a language of both folk and high culture and academic research. YIVO established its Buenos Aires branch in 1928, known as YIVO, and moved to the US in 1940. In the decades that passed since, and continuing in the 21st century, YIVO and YIVO have been operating as two independent institutions that share the commitment to continue as well as expand YIVO's original mission. Today, the two speakers, YIVO's director, Sylvia Hansmann, and Stephanie Halpern, director of the archives of the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research, explore this continuity. By presenting a selection of items, they reconstruct the history of their collections. After their presentations, I will ask them about what they plan for their institution's second century of operations. Following that, we will open the stage for your questions. So please, at any time, enter your question in the chat function. Please note, as we mentioned already, this event is recorded and it will be made available on YouTube. And Spanish subtitles we plan to add for the event. So without further ado, we are now going to YIVO Archives in New York. It is my distinct honor to introduce our guide, Stephanie Halpern. She's the director of the YIVO Archives since 2019. She's a trained archivist and scholar of Jewish literature. Her publications focus on Jewish and Yiddish theater and archival studies. She's the editor of the forthcoming book, 100 Objects from the YIVO Collections, honoring YIVO's 100th anniversary.
Thank you, Catalan. Thank you, AJL, and thank you all for being here today. I am just going to share my screen.
Stephanie, in the meanwhile, I just want to apologize with the Spanish-speaking attendants that the subtitles is closed caption, so it's not really going to help much. I hope that I'm going to pass to Spanish just to let everybody know. Les quería simplemente disculparme que veo que el subtitulado en realidad es como una transliteración y no una traducción. Así que les pido mil disculpas. Lo que sí les digo que después de la charla se va a subir a YouTube como para que la puedan ver y ahí sí ya va a tener el subtitulado en castellano. Thank you, Stephanie. I apologize for that.
No problem. No problem. So before I introduce you to just a few objects from the YIVO collection, I wanted to start with this image of one of YIVO's stack floors here in New York, which houses the 24 million documents, objects, photographs, sound recordings that we have amassed over the past 100 years and the 400,000 volumes of books, all of which are open to researchers when they come visit us here in New York, and increasingly when we are able to digitize materials online. So YIVO, as Catalin mentioned, was founded in 1925 with headquarters in Vilna, Poland, by a group of Jewish scholars, writers, lay leaders who really recognized the importance of collecting, researching, studying, and teaching the stuff of everyday Jewish life and the 1,000-year history of Jewish civilization in Eastern Europe. And one of this foundational tenets was collecting folk materials from the Jewish community. And YIVO, over the years, did this in a variety of ways, including making calls for particular types of materials, and in the beginning, putting out questionnaires. YIVO, as many of you know, was a global organization with societies all around the world that helped YIVO in a variety of ways, including collecting materials. And in order to collect from the Jewish community, YIVO used a network of amateur collectors, or Sammlers in Yiddish, to gather materials and to send them to YIVO's headquarters. By 1929, the hundreds of members of more than 163 collecting circles had collected more than 50,000 proverbs, folk tales, and folk songs, and sent them to YIVO. And so this story that we see here, A Pain in the Neck, is one of these pieces that was collected in YIVO's early years. It's what is known as a nonsense tale. And I will just read you a bit of it so that you can sort of get an idea, but it's sort of a rambling story that rests on sort of word turns and different phrases. So I'll just read a few lines of it in English. Once upon a time, there was a very rich poor man. He had no children except for 9 daughters. His oldest son took it into his head to go to the fair. So he sat on a match, rode up the chimney, and was driven riding to the water. 2 sieves, one with a bottom, the other without, were floating in the water. He sat down between them and floated. Suddenly, he heard someone shout that the synagogue was on fire, so he had to rescue the bathhouse. But just then he remembered he hadn't yet eaten, and it goes on and on like that. And if you're interested, there is a great volume of some of these folk tales from our collections, translated by Bina Weinreich, called Yiddish Folk Tales. YIVO wasn't just interested in collecting these materials. They really collected these in the service of scholarship, and the number of studies and books and articles and journals and brochures that YIVO supported and then published was really robust. So the second item I chose is a bibliography of YIVO publications between 1925 and 1941. And it's really representative of YIVO's focus on scholarship, right? On using the materials that they collected to create all of these scholarly works. This book boasts that between 1925 and 1941, YIVO published more than 30,000 pages of scholarship across hundreds of journals, books, articles, pamphlets, brochures. The work of this particular volume was almost completed in 1939, but the publication itself couldn't move forward because of the war. And so it was taken up in New York, where YIVO's headquarters had been transferred in 1940, and this was published, as you see, in 1943 in New York, so it was able to include those New York-based publications from 1940 and 1941. This item here, which is a report of the Vilna Ghetto Library and Reading Room, to me sort of represents the transitional period for YIVO and for its collections. This library and reading room report was put together by the head of the library, Hermann Cook, who did this in October 1942, along with other members of the library ghetto administration, including the philologist Zella Kamenovich, who was once the former deputy director of YIVO, and Heiko Lunsky, who was the former chief librarian of the Strasbourg Library. And this 33-page manuscript includes a hand-drawn cover, many statistical tables, as you can see, hand-colored diagrams that really offer an analysis of the library's holdings by language, by literary genre, borrowing preferences according to content and language, and here we see according to gender. Just show you another image from the booklet. And this is part of the Avram Sutzkever and Shmerke Kaczerginski collection, which are materials that were saved from Nazi destruction. So YIVO's collections in Vilna were one of many institutions, Jewish institutions, that were looted by the Nazis. And there was a forced labor brigade meant to decide what would be destroyed and what would be sent to Frankfurt, to the Institute for the Study of the Jewish Question. And a smaller group of these individuals, dubbed the Paper Brigade, decided that they would try to save materials at all costs. And so they smuggled these materials out of the YIVO building and into the Vilna ghetto. And those represented some of YIVO's most precious documents. And in addition to this, they also collected and created materials within the Vilna ghetto that they also buried in bunkers. And Avram Sutzkever and Shmerke Kaczerginski, two members of the Paper Brigade, survived the war. They dig up these materials and they start collecting again in what is now the Soviet Union, and they eventually, in a very short period of time, realize that collecting Jewish materials and creating a Jewish museum, there's no place for that in the Soviet Union. And so they begin to send these materials to YIVO in New York, whose headquarters, as I said, had been officially transferred to New York in 1940. There had always been an American branch in New York. And so this piece here, what we call the Lodz Ghetto Children's Album, was presented by the schools department just before Rosh Hashanah 1941 to the head of the Judenrat, Chaim Romkowski. And the album itself is signed by the 14,000 plus students and the 700 teachers who were part of the Lodz Ghetto schools. Each school created a very beautiful sort of greeting to Rumkowski, often, thanking him for the food and the water and the shelter and the supplies, the school supplies, and then signed by all of the students in the schools. There were only about 200 students who passed through the Lodz Ghetto schools who survived the war. And so this item, in many ways, is a sort of last remnant of some of these children. But it is representative of a much larger collecting initiative that YIVO, now in New York, started in 1945 to create an archives of Jewish life under Nazi rule. And they asked for individuals who had been Sammlers for YIVO before the war to collect what they could and of Jewish communities, of surviving Jewish communities, of materials from camps and ghettos. And they held this call for 10 years. And over the course of those 10 years, they amassed about 7 million pages of primary source materials on the Holocaust. Now, this collection on the Lodz Ghetto came from Nachman Zonneben, who was the postman, one of the postmen in the Lodz Ghetto, who was part of a small forced labor brigade after the liquidation of the ghetto to clean the ghetto up he took these materials that, and he threw them into a suitcase, threw them down a dry well, covered the well, survives the war, and begins bringing these materials to YIVO in the 1950s. And the fifth item that I chose, sort of to round out, the types of materials that YIVO collects, something that you don't see very often. This is a vitrine of these paper mache heads that were created in honor of the Maury Schwartz Yiddish art theater production of Yosha Kalb. Maury Schwartz was a great Yiddish actor and theater impresario, and it was created in 1933 by Morris Strasberg, who was an actor and did work with Maury Schwartz. And this piece, to me, is representative of YIVO's overall Yiddish theater collections. We house one of the largest collections of the global Yiddish stage. And the core of our collection really begins with when YIVO receives the materials from the Esther Rachel Kaminska Theater Museum, named in honor of the great star of the Yiddish stage, Esther Rachel Kaminska, created in honor of her death. And when the collection comes to YIVO in 1929, there are at that point 1,300 pieces, and over the decades, actors and playwrights and set designers and individuals doing research on the Yiddish stage sent their materials to YIVO. And even when YIVO moves to New York in 1940, they continue a relationship with the Yiddish theaters, and they continue to get materials. Though I never saw this, this vitrine also sort of represents, to me, YIVO's place in New York. When YIVO moved to its longtime home in the Vanderbilt Mansion, this vitrine stood in the entryway and was sort of a focal point for individuals to come when they came in the building. And I just heard a wonderful story that on occasion there would be someone famous visiting YIVO for research. And this particular story was Barbra Streisand, who was doing research for her role in Yentl. And she was in the building, and people would mill about in front of this vitrine, pretending to be looking at the heads. But in fact, they were just waiting to catch a glimpse of Barbra Streisand. But really, this sort of represents the permanence of YIVO in New York and the building itself.
Thank you, Stephanie. I feel bad that I think we could sit here and listen to more, but now we have to make a trip south to Buenos Aires, because Sylvia is going to take us to another tour. So it is my distinct honor to introduce Sylvia Hansmann, who is the director of YIVO. She's a historian, an archivist, and a translator. And since 2002, she has been dedicating her time and energy in recovering YIVO collections damaged in the 1994 bombing of the AMIA building. And I would like to remind those in the audience who heard Zachary Baker give a talk about the history of YIVO. He actually showed us a photo or two about what happened to that building. Sylvia is working to develop the YIVO collections, focusing on two areas. One is Yiddish culture in Latin America, and the other one is Shoah records. So without further ado, I pass the microphone to Sylvia.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I'm going to give like a brief introduction to how YIVO was created in Latin America and in Argentina. By the late 19th century, a wave of Jews immigrants were leaving Western Europe and settling all over the world, in the Americas, in South Africa, in Australia. And they brought with them their customs, their languages, their organizations, and their ways of lives. As the result of that, the term Eastern European Jew was no longer just a geographical label, and it became a cultural identity all over the world. In this context, and with a conscious to this issue, is that YIVO Buenos Aires was created. The first center was established in Vilna in 25, but in 26, group of supporters of YIVO gathered here in Buenos Aires with the goal of creating local chapters in all Latin America. They succeeded as in 28, there was already established a chapter here in Buenos Aires, and in the archives of YIVO, we can find profuse correspondence between YIVO Buenos Aires and YIVO La Paz, Bolivia, a committee of friends in Peru, in Uruguay, in Brazil, and many other local YIVO friends. Here in Buenos Aires, as YIVO gained the academic and social prestige, the Argentinian Jewish community invited YIVO to move into its new building that was being built in 45. YIVO sold its original home and inaugurated its work and I would say in an ecosystem of Yiddish speaking organizations with base in the community building. The attack in 1994 destroyed the building, claimed 85 lives, left injured more than 300 people, and put the YIVO collection at great risk. The catalog were lost, and the process of recovery began at the very moment with more than 800 young volunteers that were led by Esther Schwartz, that I've seen her here in the meeting. Hello, Esther, thank you for being here. And under the direction of Abraham Lichtenboim. And today, thanks to all the efforts of this chain of generations, YIVO is relocated here where I'm sitting now in the Shimon Dubnov house in Buenos Aires. I'm going to present now the objects of my choice. And first of all, I would like to present the personality of Rozhansky, who was founder and a leader of the all YIVO efforts. He was also a teacher of many generations of Yiddish teachers that you probably know them well. He was the founder and teacher of the Aspirantur and the Lehrer Seminar. He was teacher of teachers like Abraham Lichtenboim, Esther Schwartz, Eliezer Nivolsky, Abraham Noverstern, Professor Sheintuch, and many others. And Rozhansky has this trait. He integrated the emotional dimension into teaching. And for him, Yiddish was a means of community building and of intellectual challenge, both at the same time. So the first item is, let's see the second. He was the leading figure in the Musterberg project. In the 50s, he was concerned by the scarcity of new Yiddish books and the declining number of readers, and he envisioned an anthology of high quality edition, intellectually rigorous and accessible to new generations of post-Shoah readers. He wanted also to expand the canon, so he included masterpieces of the classics like Sholem Aleichem, Peretz, Mendele, but also contemporary writers that were writing at that moment, like Sutzkever, Kadia Molodowsky, Itzik Manger, and also he reworked old pieces, like early Yiddish texts like Bovebuch and Glickel von Hameln, and he included, I think this is like the most impressive, I think it's 11 volumes of community dedicated volumes on different communities, like the literary production in South Africa, in Brazil, in Chile, in Canada, Uruguay, Mexico, Cuba, Argentina. And this text cannot be found in, some of them cannot be found in any other place. And what we are seeing here is the Abonnentenbuch. It's the, because the Musterberg was a collaborative project that embodied YIVO's grassroots spirit. It was supported by Joseph Lifshitz, a wealthy diamond dealer from Johannesburg, but it was also funded through a network of subscribers who received between 2 to 4 books each year. They would pay in advance, and in that way, this was a huge collaborative effort. Let's move to the next. And a very important part of our collection is correspondence. Correspondence can be found in many collections. And I just chose some items from the Leike Gilinska and Iser Kogan collection. Leike was an educator and Iser was a writer known by the name Tzalel Blitz. And they met in their hometown in the Sventian when they were almost kids. They were in love, and during all their lives, they wrote to each other letters. When he had to go to the Polish army to serve, when she had to go to work in France, in Paris, these letters trace their migration journey, reflecting the separations they had to endure, the language and cultures they encountered in their separations, and also the political exchanges between Europe and Latin America. The correspondence range begins in Swentian, Poland, and continues Paris. And when they had planned to move to the Soviet Union, but they failed. So they later migrated to Brazil, waiting to enter Argentina. He was able to enter Argentina, but she didn't get the papers. So they were writing also when she stayed in Brazil and he in Argentina. And they also wrote to each other letters when he was an administrator in the colonies, in the rural colonies, and she left and he had to travel through many colonies. So they also exchanged letters during this period. The archive also sheds light at the linguistics interactions between Yiddish and French and Spanish. What you see now is a postcard in which they are exploring code of a mix of Yiddish and French, because she lived together with other Yiddish-speaking girls in her apartment, and she didn't want them to be able to read the love correspondence between the two. Let's move on. And you can see here the address, the Argentinian address in Colonia Dominguez, but if you take a look, it's written in the Cyrillic alphabet, trying to adapt it to the Argentinian phonetics. And this is from Sventian to Dominguez. Let's move on. Here is Severin. Okay, let's move on. The next one, the next one. I chose a draft for a scenography by Leon Poch, who was born in Sosnowiec, Poland in 1913. And he died in Buenos Aires in 2005. He was active in the media, in the newspapers. He was the illustrator of one of the most important Argentinian comic books. Those Argentinian among us know Paturuzú. It was a very important publication, and he had there section on the porteños, on the joys and anguish of being porteños. He worked for the Yiddish theater, and let's see the next picture is the same object, but as you can see, the object opens up, and you can see also the constructive and also the artistic issues related to Yiddish theater. The design has layers with instructions, and also let's see now the last one of this item. It's the full color design that this conveys the final product. And I love this because it's a depiction of the shtetl recreating on stage, while he maintains the interplay between the interior and the exterior of the space. Let's move. We wanted to bring something to embody the dialogue between Yiddish and Latin American musical genres, and that would be tango. So let's move to the other one. The first mention to tango dates back to the 18th century, but in 1910, wealthy Argentinians arrived in Paris and tango became a success there. Many orchestras, Argentinian orchestras, went to Paris, but to Poland, tango arrived in the form of disc, of recordings. So many Polish artists, they made their own interpretation of tangos. What we see here is to score music of Avrom Shevach, a writer and Tziganeri. they were two Bialystokers, two immigrants to Buenos Aires. They had already written tangos in Bialystok, but it took them almost 10 years to write again tangos in Buenos Aires. And this is, they resumed composing tangos together only in the 40s. And even by then, tango was already more accepted in Buenos Aires. For the Yiddish Argentinian cultural world, tango was still controversial because it was caught up in the main debate between Shun, the popular entertainment, and the high culture in Yiddish theater. So Abraham Shevach was a writer by all means, and they just resumed writing tangos in the 40s. Okay, the last item I chose is a Briefsteller, a book to learn how to write letters. And this book came together with the Jewish Cultural Reconstruction Project. When the war ended, many of the material that remained in Europe without owners were rescued by a project named Jewish Cultural Reconstruction and were set in different libraries around the world. Part of this collection arrived also in Buenos Aires, and also some of, here in Buenos Aires, there was a collection that nucleated these items with items brought by survivors. So after the bombing, these items were looked after, and the volunteers that were risking them, they started calling them the twice saved objects that were rescued from the Holocaust and from the AMIA bombing. And I chose this one because it shows this ecosystem between Yiddish languages, between Jewish languages, as in the same book, you have Yiddish text and Hebrew text, an explanation on how to read and write. And the interesting thing about these items, these Briefstellers, is that people use them as one of the first instrument to learn to write and starting normatize Yiddish. And in this specific book, you can see also many marks like stamps and handwriting of Jewish organization to which they belong before the Holocaust. Okay, I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, not enough.
Okay.
We could all sit here and listen to you more, but we have very short time. I'm checking the chat. I don't really see questions to you, but I would like to stick to our plan and ask both of you about what's about the next 100 years. And so please.
Sylvia, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. We have now like a very short term project. It's a new edition of a self-teaching Yiddish book using the assimil method. It was written by Nadia Dean Rothschild and Annick Margulis, and it was translated by Lucas Fishman and supervised by Eliezer Nivorsky. So we have great expectation of having this book probably by May to present it we have book fair here in Buenos Aires. So we are very, and if I see here many Yiddish people from Buenos Aires, so it's a, ¿cómo se dice primicia? Es una primicia para ustedes. The book is going to be ready very soon. And then we have like a pending project that it's just starting now, that is the creation of an area of research focused on Yiddish and the Shoah. And Perla Sne is the head of this area in YIVO. She's our vice president in YIVO. And we are planning on research and translation of Shoah documents into Spanish. The other research area is an area for emerging researchers, young scholars, to support those that are beginning their research journey into Yiddish-related issues. And the International Yiddish Seminar that goes in the same direction, that is organized together between YIVO and UNTREF, the National University, 3 de Febrero, that I think it is its 15th edition. And the last important step that is, I hope it's going to be very important for the next stages, is that the Argentine Jewish Genealogical Society has moved to YIVO, and we are working together as a research area. Here is called ACHA, and we are joining this year to the International Associations of Genealogical Societies. So this is our major projects for the next years.
On YIVO's end, we, for the past 8 or 9 years, have been attempting to make our archival materials more accessible to individuals around the world. And for us, that means digitizing as much of our holdings as we can. And since about 2015, we've put over 5 million pages of materials online. And we are currently engaged in another large-scale project to put the entirety of the Bund archives online, which is about 3.5 million pages of materials. YIVO received the entire Bund archives in 1992. And these materials are not just about the Bund, but they are also about labor and political movements all around the world. And after that, and Sylvia, what you're talking about with the genealogy coming to you, our next big project after the digitization of the Bund archives will be putting what we're calling our genealogy and family history collections online. That includes all of the Landsmannschaften, all of the materials from that we received from HIAS, from the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, including 250,000 Holocaust-era case files. And so our goal really is to make accessible these materials to not just to the scholars, but also to to all of the family historians out there who can really mine our collections for their own history. And sort of in this vein, in making materials accessible to individuals who might not otherwise feel comfortable coming to us, we have a new initiative where we are appealing directly to school-age children, to high school and college children, and bringing them into the institution, and teaching them about Jewish history and culture through the use of primary source materials. It's called the YIVO Learning and Media Center, and we've recreated archival boxes with high quality reproductions so that kids can come in and they can actually leaf through a box and kind of get the feel for what it means to work in an archive and what it means to engage with archival materials, because we understand that it's intimidating to come to us. And we hope that by teaching them these skills as high school and college students, that maybe will inspire them to do archival research, you know, as when they're older, and also maybe will inspire them to become the next generation of archivists and librarians who can be the stewards of these materials.
Thank you, both of you. And there are great reactions in the chat. We also have two questions. One is to hear more about whether there are cooperative projects between YIVO and YIVO. And another one is what happened to that couple who were corresponding, and YIVO now has their letters. I don't know if it makes sense.
Sylvia, I think the second question's for you, right?
Yes, for Sylvia.
Yes.
Unless you know.
I don't know.
Okay, I'll answer both, okay? Currently, we don't have any collaborative projects between YIVO and YIVO.
Aside from
But
this seminar.
and I want to use the opportunity to thank Katalin for that, because she succeeded where we didn't. So thank you so much for making this happen. But I think this may be a beginning, and I truly hope that we can come up with some collaborative projects in the near future. And as per our couple, they finally arrived both in Argentina. They built here a family. She was a teacher. She was in her first profession, she was an accountant. But here in Argentina, she became a teacher. He became a writer, and they lived a long life. They moved later to Buenos Aires, and they were very active in the Jewish left organizations. You can find his books probably in the site of the Yiddish Book Center by the name of Tzalel Blitz.
Thank you. We are just on time, and even though it's hard for me to say goodbye, I have to ceremonically close the meeting. I really thank our speakers. This was a treat, and I thank the audience. And I really hope that this is a beginning of hearing more about these objects and these stories. It's really fascinating. Thank you. Thank you all.
Is there time
Thank
for
you,
a question
Katalin.
or
Thank you,
comment?
Stephanie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sylvia.
And also thank you to all Argentinian YIVO and Latin American. I can recognize very familiar faces, so thank you all.